It hurts to lose an impressive player like L'Jarius Sneed, but you got to go out and find somebody to take his snaps. The Chiefs have options, including a rookie. What does that DB look like right now, that entire room today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy Friday. It's a post-draft Friday in Chiefs Kingdom, and that means we get to talk about whatever we want to talk about and have some fun. Hope you all are doing well. This is Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. I'm Ryan Tracy from NFL33.com, as well as RGR Football and RogueAPC.com. We're doing a lot this week. Check out all those outlets to get the rest of our work and follow not just the Chiefs, but the whole league. We have some great content coming for you today because we have to get to what is one of the star positions, the defensive backs in general, but the cornerbacks up front. We're going to get into it and run you down where they're at right now, but we are free and available on every single platform today, starting here on YouTube, where we would ask you to like, sub, and hit the bell. Thanks for joining us here. You can get on the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the free audio platforms have us free every single day. Plus, then, you're going to get some bonus content. Next week, I have some bonus content coming for you with a national analyst that I think you're going to enjoy spending some time with. You can then get into the text line at 816-357-8781 and get all that running. Now, what does the DB room look like? That's what we're covering today as a whole. As the depth and the youth creep in, what does that mean for the whole unit that Dave Merritt and Steve Spagnuolo are going to focus on come OTAs and certainly into training camp? That's coming up later in the show. The roster's got a ton of corner talent on it. How can it filter out? We're going to run down where those battles are and what it looks like at this moment before we see OTAs. But we have to start with what is the draft pick. Kamal Hadden comes onto this roster with a lot of upside and a lot particularly on the production side. But there's a couple of caveats we have to watch out for. And that's only because you are on now a roster that has lost L'Jarius Sneed, the leader of the cornerback room. That will automatically fall to Trent McDuffie to lead that group. And you have a couple of other guys that are 2 years under their belts, I think going in opposite directions, but there's a good bit of volume of experience and a whole lot of talent. Where does that leave Hadden for you starting off right now before we get to OTAs?
Well, it's interesting because Hadden to me is stepping into L'Jarius Sneed's shoes. And I know people are going to look at that and go, he's not Sneed. And I fully admit he's not Sneed. But his measurables, his 10 split, all of that is almost identical to what L'Jarius Sneed was. And that's exactly what I mean by he's stepping into LJ's shoes. Now, he's a different player. There's obviously going to be differences in the way they play and the way they see the game. So it's not player for player the same guy, obviously. But his arm length, his height, weight, all that stuff is nearly identical to what Sneed was. So they have a type. They went and they got their type. The question now is, can they develop him into being something that's anywhere close to what Sneed became? Sneed year one, I'm not going to say he played fantastic, but he played pretty decent. I don't expect that from Hadden. I do think that Hadden's going to have to challenge to try to get playing time at this point. But the measurables are there, and you see what the Chiefs look for in those types of measurables. And I do think that gives them kind of an idea as to what they want in a corner.
There are a lot of measurables that do compare very, very directly. Size being one of them, like you said, 10 split. It's outside of that. Change of direction. Yep. His short area matrix is not as close. And obviously the long speed is a vastly different number. But for that 2-second countdown that you have to try to get to the quarterback, he's physical, he's long, he's got a 10 split, he can turn and run and stay with that receiver. Even if he's outmatched with a guy with a lot of speed in that 10-yard, 15-yard area, and that's where you have to protect him from that. So you got to get after the quarterback. Now, overall, that aligns a little bit more with what we see from Joshua Williams than it does from L'Jarius Sneed, because L'Jarius had measurables all over the place and didn't really have the weak spot. So I like what you're saying there. And physically, walking in and having that size, I think that's next in a long line. I want to see what comes next with the confidence factor. The big thing about L'Jarius Sneed was that he walked onto the playing field on OTAs, got with Steve Spagnuolo, started learning immediately, and was able to show progression right off the gate. And I do think that there's an opportunity for him, if he can do the same thing, that Hadden can be a guy that pushes Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson, who Watson, I think, fell off a little bit more than Williams did last year. And I think that there's plenty of room to battle for those outside corner positions in OTAs and certainly in training camp.
Well, and we're going to talk about some of the other corners on the roster. Najee Johnson, I think, needs to be talked about in that room as well. I do think that this is going to be an interesting competition because you're looking at having a lot of different corners that can do different things that can play on this roster. And so it's going to be a question as to who's going to make it. I do think that Hadden is going to be on the team. The question is, what role is he going to play? Is he going to be playing corner 5? Is he going to be playing corner 6, which is possible to be on this roster as corner 6? They do have some talented depth already with Williams and Watson and McDuffie all being here for 2 years. And now you got Najee Johnson coming back and you have Nick Jones coming back. There's some guys that we're going to need to talk about.
Yeah, there definitely are. We're going to get to them coming up in the next segment. In this role for Hadden playing outside, I think he's an outside only. He's not a nickel. So that, I think, is another separator within the room. And so those guys are going to fall into 2 categories. We're going to run those down on each side coming up next on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much, much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. When it comes to your financial future, you can think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and the data you need in one place. They're the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com.
The Locked On Sports Today feed is where you are going for 24/7 coverage of all your big sports stories, NBA, NHL, whatever you're looking for right now. It is on there at Locked On Sports Today here on YouTube and on Amazon Fire. Fire is what I'm looking for from the corner group, and it's something that the Chiefs look forward to. The physicality, the ability to play press man is something that on the outside you must have, but you got to have a little of it on the inside as well. And yes, we ran down Kamal Hadden last segment, but he's just one of many DBs on this roster. Currently, let me run this down real quick at the corner spot. If you didn't have a better idea, my guess right now is that Trent McDuffie stays inside at the nickel, and he's your starter. And that would put Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson as the 1s and 2s on the outside. I think Hadden would be in the mix then. As you mentioned, Najee Johnson will be in the mix then. There is Chamari Connor. There's Echo Boyedo. There is Keith Taylor. There's Nick Jones, who I think is both he and Najee I like better at the nickel than I like at the outside. But if you're going to have your best defender and your best corner in the group running at the nickel in Trent McDuffie, it makes sense that you're just going to have to get some snaps outside because he's not going to miss a whole lot of action. Chris is going to unmute himself here real quick.
When you start looking at what they have at that position, the question becomes, how many are they going to keep? I mean, you could name 5 right now when you start talking McDuffie and Najee Johnson and, Josh Williams and Watson and Hadden. That's already 5 at that point. I think you look at this, and I think you probably keep 6. Now, the question is it going to be Nick Jones? Could be Iko Bordo, could be lots of different players. Trailer's been on this roster some. They have a couple of new UDFAs. We'll see whether or not they can actually show something when we actually get to a part of training camp to actually see what they have. But, you mentioned Shamari Connor. I think that they're going to list him at safety. So I think your safety group is already pretty much taken care of at this point. I'm not saying Connor can't come down and help at the corner position at times, but I do think that you're probably looking at 6 corners at this point, just because the depth of talent that you have at that position. And maybe Haddon's a guy that doesn't get many snaps this season, and he's a guy that develops for next year.
You could be right. And I think looking at this group, we're going to talk about the safeties here when we talk about the room as a whole coming up in the next segment. Certainly 10 DBs total doesn't shock you. So 6 could definitely be corners. I really do see Shamari Khan as a guy that can play both if they needed it. But that was predicated on Trent McDuffie playing outside. And I just don't see that coming right now. So the question becomes, who's got the strength and the length to play on the outside against big wide receivers? There's still Q Johnson over in Los Angeles. There's still Cortland Sutton, at least right now, in Denver. There's Devontae Adams. Like, you have to have the physicality to play in this division on the outside corner position. And that's why I just feel like, as good as Najee Johnson showed us last year, A, coming off the injury, and B, being a guy that's smaller and at a disadvantage against all those receivers, it makes it hard for me to project him to the outside.
Well, and he may not play outside, but I still think he's on the roster. I think that he was showing that he can play on the roster, and maybe he gives them an opportunity to put McDuffie outside. And I know that that's not a bigger guy, but if you feel like Najee Johnson could go in and play at that nickel position and do just about as good as McDuffie, maybe that's the direction that they go. And you're looking at a situation where Joshua Williams is your other starting corner and Watson's on the outside looking in, or maybe it's Watson and you're looking on the outside looking in for Williams. There's lots of different directions that they can go with the corner group. It's talented. That's the big key there. It's young, it's talented, and they've got guys that have a ton of experience playing on this defense, and a couple of guys that don't have a lot of experience, but they have niche roles.
You nailed it right there, especially between the two guys that we're expecting to both kind of make that third year jump. So my question is, will the real Chiefs corner please stand up? Is it Joshua Williams or is it Jalen Watson? Can it be both? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, when you start looking at what you want from a physical athlete perspective, Williams makes a lot of sense. I can understand why they would want him to take another step forward. And I do think he has the ability to take a step forward. It's just whether or not he's actually able to put it together and be in that position. The big key, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into the safety group even more, is you look at the corners you have to put them in the positions to be successful. And I think that they can do that by using the different positional groups that they have, not just corners, but, put your linebackers in the right positions, put your safeties in the right positions, use your safeties to come in and do certain things that maybe you would normally have a corner do. And they do have the depth at that safety position to be able to do that. And the skill level and the talent. Sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think there's a couple of guys that can cross over and do a little bit of both. 3 come to my brain, especially. We're going to talk about them and how it fits into the DB room as a whole coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This segment is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. And sometimes all you need is the opportunity to get something off your chest, big, small, or otherwise, and really get it out there so you can start to work on you. It's important to let that stuff out, especially if someone who's unbiased in your life is there to listen. So today I want you to start I want to say how I'm really feeling about something, even though you may have me thinking about the same thing this week. I'm a little frustrated with the off the field stuff that's going on with the Kansas City Chiefs. And, they got to pull it together, and they got to act, I think, in the offseason when you're away from the team, just like you would when you're there, because you have to make sure that you are pulling your oar year round. This is a no vacation business. And if you need it, you got to reach out for the help that you need. Therapy can be one that can be different for everyone, can be helpful for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, although that's what's at the tip of my brain. And it's important to get things off of your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suitable to your schedule and adaptable. It makes life simple to start one direction. And if you have to change therapists, you can do that for free with no added expense. BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Go there and you're going to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. "24/7 is something usually only my wife enjoys about me, but if you want sports that often, you can get it on Locked On Sports today here on YouTube and on the Amazon Fire feed. Make sure you check that out. The DB room as a whole. I love the fact that we have to talk about how many of these guys there are, because the Chiefs are never scared to bring in a first-round pick, a fourth-round pick, a seventh-round pick, a UDFA. It doesn't matter. They're going to bring you in if you have a trait they feel that they can exploit and grow on, and I think all of these guys do. Every single DB on this roster has something the Chiefs feel that they can enhance and might be able to contribute to a championship. There's so many. I want to go back to what we were just talking about, guys that can play both positions. I know that you feel Connor should be a safety. I think that's probably where he starts at camp, and then if there's no injuries, maybe he stays there the whole time. They have a plethora there, along with a rookie we'll talk about in a second. But the two other guys that stand out to me are lower down the depth chart. Miles Battle is one who was just signed as a free agent here and looked good in rookie camp, a guy with immaculate size for playing in this defense. And if his eyes are if his eyes are half as good as his size, he can contribute at the safety position maybe as readily as he could as a cornerback. And the other guy that's on there is similar in terms of length is Kelvin Joseph, who I think we all have forgotten, the Kentucky prospect that didn't work out as a corner because he doesn't have the athleticism. Kamal Hadden is more athletic than he is, and that allows him to stay at the position. I think a change to safety could help Kelvin Joseph, and that might be something they look at doing. Those three guys in particular are the big question marks to me, and who can step forward. Do you like any of them more than the other two make a position change?
It's going to be tough. You look at the position, you look at the safety position in general, and as long as Brian Cook comes back healthy, which we're expecting at this point, and Justin Reed is healthy, you're looking at a situation where Jamari Conner is your third safety and Jaden Hicks is your fourth. And at that point, I don't know that you're going to have another one on the roster, because the Chiefs still list Nazeeh Johnson as a safety. I think that they still look at him as a guy that can probably play at the back end of the defense at times as well. So you have guys that can go, that can be corners. You have guys that can play safety. And I do think that when you are looking at this DB room, I do think it's going to be 10 deep. And I think it's going to be probably 6 corners and 4 safeties, mainly because I think some of those guys that you've mentioned could go back and play safety in a pinch if needed, or could even give them, different looks at safety if needed. I mean, there's lots of different ways it could go. And we talked about it with Hicks. Hicks could potentially come down and be a linebacker of sorts at times. So it gives you even more ability to kind of mix and match your defense. And so I think that's really the big key there.
I think what I'm hoping happens is that clearly free in a way that Brian Cook is 100%. That's job number one, and that's my biggest hope. But after that, for Jaden Hicks in particular, I hope that he can grow into a role where they feel, because of his physicality and size, that he can go take away tight ends and not force Justin Reed to play above his weight limit a little bit. You know what I mean? I think Justin actually played tight ends very well last season overall, but I'd like him to not have to, is my point. So I'd like to see Connor and Hicks trade in.
Yeah, it's not his strength. Reed can do a lot in this defense, but it's not his strength to play the tight end position against the tight end. So I do think that makes a lot of sense. And the big question is, how are they going to mix and match these guys? I mean, McDuffie we know is going to be a starter. We know Reed is going to be a starter. We know Cook is going to be a starter when healthy. That's the reality is that's maybe all we really know because we don't know who the other starters are going to be at the corner position. We can surmise it's going to be, two of the two guys that have been there for the same amount of time as Trent McDuffie, but maybe it's not going to be. Maybe there's going to be somebody that steps up that's a UDFA that just got signed. Maybe it's your boy Battle. Maybe it's Hadden steps in and shows something that we don't expect. I mean, there's lots of different ways it could go. But the nice thing is that you have to feel like after winning 2 straight Super Bowls with this DB class that you have to feel like they can step in and get things done when they need to. Now, it's not going to be the same as having L'Jarius Sneed. Obviously, we've already talked about that. Pass rush is going to be even more important than it was to begin with. But the bigger key is you got some of these guys going into year 3, which if you really think about it, that's usually when younger players usually take steps forward. And you start looking at a guy like Josh Williams, who came from a HBCU college, which is not the same level of talent as a D1 school. And he's played pretty decent his first 2 seasons. Maybe he takes a big step forward this year. There's lots of different ways that this could go. I'm just going to be fascinated to see how they play at corner because regardless of who's the starter, they're going to be talented.
Yeah, and they're going to have that depth. A couple of asterisks to put on some things. Didn't want to put this on Kamal Haden at the top, but the big caveat for him obviously has some disadvantages athletically. We understand that, long speed, etc. Here's the other thing. 3 seasons in the SEC, played 23 games total. 2 seasons where he couldn't get over more than 7 games. The injury history is an issue. Yes, he's exemplary when he's on the season. And I didn't get to throw you these stats. Number 1 last season in this draft class in completion percentage allowed. Now, he only played 300 snaps, but still down there. He gave up a 7 single-digit QB rating against. That's impressive. He also was able. He also ended up number 5 in the Eagle Playmaker. That's for his career, and number 6 in the Hawk rate from last season. So those are a couple of things for him.
Interesting thing, though, when you look at what the Chiefs have been able to do, and this is going to be something to watch, and I know Snead's not on the team any longer, but that's going to be something to watch in Tennessee is how healthy is he able to stay? Because he's been injured pretty much his entire Chiefs career with his knee. And obviously it was good enough that they signed him to a long-term deal and they traded for him, whatever. But you have to wonder, can this Chiefs team get the same kind of thing from Hadden? I mean, yeah, injury history is injury history. I'm not trying to say that he'll be healthy all the time, but can you find a way, or is your training staff good enough to be able to get it to where he's not going to miss as many games as a pro as he did in college? I mean, that's possible. We'll see. I'm really curious to see what he's able to contribute, and maybe his contribution this year is just special teams. Maybe this is a year where he's working on getting healthy, and maybe he doesn't play at all because you've got corners in front of him that don't let him play. I mean, that's possible. He is a 6th-round pick, so it's not like he's going to be stepping in and being expected to be a starter.
And just to go back to one other thing that you said, it's I think the size of the training staff and can he get enough attention? Hopefully, that's one of the things that we saw in the player survey that we expect to be changed a little bit. And just so that I don't neglect them, there are 2 purple people eaters that I think we need to mention that are the wild cards in these groups. One is Echo Boyd, OK State. Had some flashes, should certainly be in the mix. And if you have to have length to play outside, he's a guy that's going to have an advantage over some of the smaller corners. The other guy is going to be Keith Taylor that I think we forget about because he's an older prospect. This is going to be, I believe, his 4th season, going into 4 for him. Also from Washington, played with Trent McDuffie back in the day, was older than him by 2 seasons. But I think a guy that also has length, size, and is in a similar situation to Hadden in terms of just not having long speed. So a guy that understands the game and has been able to stick around on the practice squad. 2 other wild cards that might be able to contribute.
Well, and when you look at that, we've talked about what now 13, 14 guys that we think that have a chance of making the roster at the DB room, and they're only going to be able to keep 10. That's kind of why I go back to what I said yesterday about maybe being able to trade somebody for an offensive lineman or some other position where you don't feel like you have the depth that you want, because I do feel like the DB room is deep, and they're not going to be able to keep guys that they want to be able to keep. Deion Bush is a great example of a guy that stepped in and actually did something for them in the playoffs, and he's probably on the outside looking in right now through almost no fault of his own, because the Chiefs went out and drafted Hicks. And unless they keep five true safeties as they have them right now on the team, I have a hard time seeing Bush be on the team. Now, is it possible he's on the practice squad again and comes up at different times? Absolutely. But they're not going to release the top 4 guys that are above him right now. All 4 of those guys are going to be on the roster in some way, shape, or form.
And every minute makes that even more the case. He has been on the practice squad designated every single year in Kansas City and has been activated at some point to come in and play snaps. I think that's exactly what happens. And I feel old because of this. Deion is evidently my sundial. This is going to be Deion's 8th season upcoming. That's how long he's been around. So yeah, we forget about that sometimes. So I agree with you. It's
so
great to have
he came out the same.
Have that.
Yeah, he came out the same year that we started this show. There you go.
2016. Bada boom. Folks, if you want to get all of the information, make sure you get subscribed, because we're here 5 days a week, all off season, all regular season, all seasons, period. And we're going to give you the bonus content. I have something coming for you next week, conversation with my guy, Nick Baumgardner of The Athletic, one of their draft analysts. You can get the text line at 816-357-8781. Get subbed over there. Hope you have a great weekend. We're going to be back with you on Monday, getting ready for OTAs and the schedule release that is coming next week.
Yeah, and this is the dead time of the NFL, and I wonder if this is the time where the Chiefs drop news. So just be ready, because we may end up having to do a couple of bonus things over the time. I just feel like with the cap space they have available, they're going to make a move of some sort, and we'll see when that happens. But and we do have the schedule release next week as well, so be looking forward to that. That will be coming out, I believe, on the 15th. So we'll have our reaction on Thursday.
Buckle up. There's no off season. Welcome to it. We appreciate you guys joining us today. Make sure you like and sub here on YouTube and on the audio platforms of Spotify and Apple Podcasts.